And as always, I'm really speaking from experience because this is something that I catch myself doing all the time in my awareness, right? It's very easy to look around and perceive the beauty of nature and, oh God, look, it's your beautiful creation. It's all one with you. It's all a manifestation of you. It's easy to look into the eyes of another person and experience the presence of God in them, the I am, the Christ, and say, God, this is your beloved son, your beloved daughter, and to experience their oneness with God. But it seems to be oftentimes the most difficult to really look inside of ourselves and see that, yes, I too am one with God. I am nothing but, I am nothing other than an expression of the one. Why is it so much more difficult to do it with ourselves? That's what I want to talk about today, because actually what we're going to go through today is hopefully going to show you that realizing your oneness with God should be the easiest oneness to realize. Because when it's practically investigated, there is no other conclusion that we can come to. And so it's kind of in that vein of you have not because you ask not, right? You see not because you seek not, we might say. If you don't really seek to end this question within yourself, to answer this question within yourself, am I one with God or not? It can only be one of the two options, yeah? You can't be kind of one and kind of separate, even though we often feel that way, right? So this is called the Tale of 10 Fools. Story time with Aaron. The story goes that there were 10 travelers who had just crossed a large river by foot. These 10 travelers waded carefully through the strong currents that rushed over them as they crossed, and on reaching the other side, they decided to do a head count before continuing on. The first of the 10 began to count, 1 through 9. On finishing his count with the 9th man and forgetting to count himself, he exclaimed, "I have counted only 9. One of us has gone missing." The next man quickly performed his own count to confirm the worrying results, and he too counted only 9. Each man took his turn, each likewise forgetting to include himself in the count. Finally, agreeing together that one of them had indeed been lost to the currents, the 10 fools wept aloud by the riverside. A fisherman happened to be crossing by on his boat and noticed the 10 fools weeping aloud in inconsolable distress. Quickly, he turned his boat in their direction and docked alongside the shore next to them. "What is wrong, my friends? Why are you in such distress?" he asked. The first man replied, "10 of us have just crossed this river by foot, and now we each count only 9. One of our companions has been swept away by the current." The fisherman immediately counted each of the 10 men and realized their predicament. "These 10 fools each forgot to count themselves," he thought. "And so they believe that they have lost their companion to the river." The fisherman leapt ashore and announced that he was going to perform his own count. "To ensure that each man knows that he has been counted, I will slap each one of you across the face as I count. The pain you feel on your cheek will be the proof that no one has been left out of the count." The 10 fools happily agreed, and one by one he began to slap them across the face, counting loudly as he went along. As he reached the 10th and final man, he shouted, "10!" as he delivered the hardest blow of all. Looking around at one another with their hands on their faces, they finally realized that there had in fact been 10 of them all along, and no one had been lost. The 10 fools rejoiced at this relieving discovery and thanked the fisherman for his assistance. Aren't we just like the 10 fools, forgetting to count ourselves as part of the whole? Do we not suffer inconsolably from false feelings of lack and separation? At all times and in every moment, we are surrounded by infinite abundance, infinite energy, and infinite potential. Yet believing ourselves to be separate and apart from it, we feel as though it does not belong to us. And so we go on suffering from the imaginary sense of lack we have created. To wake up from this delusion, the universe must strike us on the cheek until we see the error of our viewpoint. The belief in lack will always generate feelings of sadness, pain, and despair. And we ought to be thankful for them. They are the wake-up calls we need in order to realize that we have simply failed to count ourselves as part of the whole. So it's a great story, isn't it, that highlights this mistake we make very well. It's easy to include everything and everyone else in oneness and be loving, be of service. Oh, I'm just here to be kind to everyone. And yet on the inside, we're not being kind to ourselves because we're not including ourselves in that oneness. And so today we're going to talk about claiming oneness because, a lot of us are starting Master Your Mind for the first time. There's been a lot of new students joining us, taking this curriculum for the first time. And so I realized that there are a lot of different sort of teachings and concepts that we offer here that might make it intimidating upon arrival of, wow, how am I going to learn all this different stuff, right? And of course, it comes one kind of slow bite at a time. But what I want to emphasize today in terms of our core teachings here is that this is sort of the working definition of enlightenment that we use here for very good reason. All of the teachings weave into one another and strengthen and complement one another. And this is the most kind of central fixture of our teachings, that enlightenment is being in loving relationship to everything. Enlightenment, we could say, is the ability to be in loving relationship with everything. And we only gain that ability in our awareness, by expanding our awareness. Because if you're not aware of God anywhere, then you will continue to judge that or resist that or separate yourself from that, which you cannot see God within, right? This is just the natural byproduct. It's cause and effect. So our problem is only that we're not seeing God everywhere and in everything. And so this is why studying metaphysics and ontology has been such a benefit to me personally, and why we incorporate so much of these metaphysical, ontological concepts in the teachings, because when you really start to grasp them, they start to make sense out of everything else. All the dots begin to connect with one another. That, oh yes, this actually does make the most sense out of my experience. We can't just stay, sort of stuck in the 3D linear time-bound world and expect to see God there, because that's the world, as the Course says, that the ego created, right? Time is an illusion of separateness. Space is an illusion of separateness. Being a self, being a body is an illusion of separateness. So everything about the 3D realm of ordinary human consciousness is designed by the ego, and has been designed by ego, to increase the belief in separation. So we can't stay, localized in this small little level of consciousness and expect to realize oneness at the same time. So let's look today kind of at the meta level, the metaphysical level of creation, and see what that level tells us about who we really are. Because some of y'all are playing way too small. And again, I know, because that's what I've done for most of my spiritual journey, is continually leave myself out of this oneness in certain ways, while also trying to give it away to everyone else. And as we know, giving and receiving are one. And so I can't truly give people the awareness of their oneness with God unless I give it to myself. There's always going to be something missing. There's going to be a limitation to my ability to love others and forgive and not judge if I'm still judging myself as being separate and so forth. And so I think one of the reasons why this habit is so common on the spiritual path, especially here in the West, right, is that many of us were taught and indoctrinated in a Christian background, right? Even if you didn't grow up in church, you've still been conditioned by this thought system, the Judeo-Christian thought system. But it's especially worse if you were brought up in it, right? That you were taught and indoctrinated for years that you're basically evil, you're pathetic, you're incapable of good, you're totally depraved, and you deserve eternal conscious torment. So you should just be grateful that God loves you enough to ritually sacrifice his son as a blood penalty to pay for your sins. my friends, we cannot underestimate the potency of such a thought system on our minds and the way that it conditions and fashions everything we think about. And so it needs extra sort of careful attention, I think, to really undo the conditioning that's been done to us since childhood, really, right? The whole world really does live with this deeply entrenched belief: I'm separate, therefore I'm guilty for all mistakes I make. I wear the responsibility for positive and negative. I got to figure this thing out. And if I don't figure it out, I'm bad, I'm wrong in some way. And so the Christian sort of ends up making the biggest possible blunder that could ever be made, spiritually speaking, which is to factor themselves completely out of the equation of life and the universe, right? To factor themselves out of the equation of existence in the universe, God, salvation. The Christian acts as if their own part to play is inconsequential, because I can't actually play a part in salvation. I'm inherently evil and separate and unworthy of God's love. So all I can do is just be thankful that God did something on my behalf. This is such an ingenious negative polarity inversion, isn't it? To make looking within yourself for God to be the most taboo thing you could ever do, the most evil thing. That's New Age, that's heresy, right? There is no way that a Christian would ever dare to look inside themselves to find God there, because they're so inundated with this idea that to look within yourself for God is evil. That's what the devil does, right? And so we need to flip this idea on its head, because if we want to call them, the Luciferian powers of this world definitely don't want you to realize the starkly obvious truth that God is the very air you breathe. God is in every thought you think. God is the power by which you are aware and conscious right now. And you could never be separate from God for even a moment, or you would cease to exist. Oneness with God is the most obvious thing in the universe. And so the ego has to spend enormous amounts of effort to hold back that realization from happening by inundating us with duality in every possible way. In the world we live in, everyone else is running on duality, thinking according to duality, speaking according to duality. So we're like swimming in this false, illusory ocean of separateness. And it's like, how can I escape this? It's everywhere. Everyone I know believes they're separate from God. Every religion tells me I'm separate from God. Everyone is telling me to exclude myself from the picture of reality, right? And so by doing this, the Christian sort of unknowingly invents a second God, a second power called the ego. And this second God is going to somehow make itself worthy of the first God by doing whatever the religious gatekeepers tell it to do, right? Believe these doctrines or you go to hell. Confess this confession or you go to hell. It's like, yes, sir, whatever you say. Being under this thought system, whether it's in Islam, Judaism, Christianity, or any kind of religion that gives this idea that the gods or God is displeased with humanity, with me, and I'm not living up to God's, written rule set or something, and so I've got to try to live up to it, and then God will be pleased with me. This is absolutely ego-driven insanity at its best, and we're going to see why. But we have to begin always with the metaphysical, ontological mistake that we're making, because that's the first order claim, right? Every theological claim that anyone makes, any religion, Christianity or otherwise, every theological claim is actually a metaphysical claim, an ontological claim, right? To claim anything theologically means you must be claiming something about the nature of God itself, right? So we have to start there and then work downstream of that. Whereas religion tends to do the opposite, right? They try to make their ontology match their theology. But we should never do that, because theology is a second order claim. Ontology is the first order. So what does it say about the nature of God if every human being is unworthy of God's love or unworthy of righteousness in some way? One of the first maxims of natural law is that all creation is extension. Course in Miracles teaches this. Hermetics teaches this. We're going to go over the maxims of natural law in our natural theology course this weekend, because natural theology is basically the study of God through nature alone. So like nature, creation, the universe is the best place to go if you want to study and learn about the nature of God, rather than old, wrinkly white men with pointy hats in a room sitting around talking about what do they think God is like based on what their theology tells them. Just kind of speculating, oh, well, we believe this about Jesus, so this must be true about God. It's always going backwards, right? Reversing the order. We can't read a book people wrote and try to derive the nature of God from it. This is like a third or fourth order claim. We have to go to the nature of God first and work downstream of there. And so going to the nature of God first is going to these maxims, these laws, right? All creation is extension. This is a fact of God's oneness. God is one, can't be divided. So there's nowhere else God can go to get materials to create you out of, for example. God can only extend itself. We call it emanation, right? God emanates its own being and creates the physical universe. And so if this is true, that all creation is extension, that means all animals, all insects, all creatures create in their own image and likeness. And do we see that in the natural world? You bet we do, right? Every creature creates after its own image and likeness, because that's a maxim of natural law. All creation is really just extension. And so this also follows the law of proportionate causality, which we've been over, which says that a cause can only give to its effect something that it has. A cause can't give its effect something that it doesn't have. And so to say that you are sinful, depraved, unworthy of God's love is to claim that God creates sin and unworthiness, right? So imagine, let's use this example. Imagine if I created a wind-up doll, like a toy soldier, and I create these wind-up toy soldiers for children to play with. And once you wind up the doll and you let it go, it walks forward. But every single toy soldier that I make, hundreds, thousands, millions of these wind-up toy soldiers, right, that I'm selling around the world, every single one of them walks to the left. You set the toy down and he always walks to the left. And every single toy that I've ever created, without one exception, always walk to the left. If that were the case, everyone would rightly say, well, the creator of this toy clearly has a flaw in his design process, right? He's incapable of making a doll that can actually walk straight. And so to that, I would say, no, my foolish friend, you just can't see the wisdom of my design. I gave every toy free will to walk whichever direction they want. I don't try to make them walk straight. They can walk left or right or straight. I give them free will. You would say, okay, cool idea, but I hate to break it to you, Aaron. Not one single doll you've ever made can do that. So no, you didn't actually give them free choice. None of these dolls clearly can choose to walk any other direction than left. So you're the problem, not the dolls. If you could show us one exception, right? If one doll could actually walk straight, you might have an arguing point. But what does Christianity say? There is nobody righteous, no, not even one. So if every single person God creates can't be righteous, can't walk the straight path, always deviates, always sins, then how is that our fault? I don't know about you, but I don't remember having a choice between getting a sin nature or a Christ nature before I came into this body. When were you presented with that choice? Was there ever a moment where you got to actually choose before birth to have a sin nature or not? Because I'll tell you what, if I had the choice, I probably would have chosen the Christ nature. So why don't we see even one person that can't go through a whole human lifetime without sinning? We have to get rid of this insanity, which says that God screwed up. The reason that no one's righteous is because something went wrong with God and God's plan. The creation fell from God's original design. You see how that's the ego offloading its own mistakes onto God? Well, it's not me, it's God. I can't be righteous. No one's capable of being righteous. Only God can save me. That's actually the ego projecting its own mistakes onto God. Really, God made the mistake, right? Because God's creation fell. God didn't mean for us to fall, but we did. And so really it's God's problem. So if you try to choose righteousness every day, but you can't do it, do you really have a choice? So we have to say, maybe this whole design of what we call sin is really just mistakes in perception, right? Maybe that's not wrong that we have mistakes in perception. Maybe that's exactly the way that the Creator wants it. Now, isn't that humility, my friends? To say that maybe there aren't any flaws. Maybe creation isn't fallen and in a state of error, right? Isn't that more respectful and humble to God to say that? Because again, if you keep positing that the universe is just full of a bunch of sinful, unrighteous people, that, God must have created this blunderously disastrous universe, that, he intended for all of us to be righteous and live with him forever, and yet all of us did the opposite of that. These are the ways that human reasoning tries to justify our belief in separation. The ego will cling to the belief in separation at all costs, even to the point of accusing God of being the problem. Unknowingly, unwittingly, right? No Christian would say that they think God's the problem, but their theology says otherwise. At the heart of their theology is this idea that, hey, God just wasn't capable of getting what God wants. God couldn't create the perfect universe God wanted because there's this stupid free will thing that God has to honor, and darn it, everyone chooses sin and not righteousness. It's like, well, God's reality must suck then if nobody's choosing it. If everybody chooses the devil's reality, everyone chooses to be a sinner and go to hell. And God's up here like, I just got to save one person. Let me send my son. It's like, what a boring, pathetic, uninspiring universe. So this is the way that the split mind will warp reality to match its belief in separation. And this is also why the Christian sort of paradigm just cannot understand oneness or non-duality. That when we say things like, I and God are one, a Christian will hear it as a person who's separate from God making some kind of exclusive claim. I, the person, am exclusively God, which is utterly ludicrous. That nobody on earth, in their right mind at least, nobody in their right mind actually thinks that they are exclusively God. So what is the claim then? The claim I am one with God is actually the claim that I don't exist as a separate self. So it's the exact opposite of the way that the Christian paradigm hears that phrase, I am one with God. They think, oh, you're making yourself a God. No, I'm saying there's nothing but God. There is no person who can claim to be God. That's duality. And so the Christian actually becomes guilty of the very worst kind of blasphemy, accidentally, when they accuse other people of claiming to be righteous of their own accord or earn salvation, right? The Christian is positing that such a thing is even possible. For example, you would never accuse somebody of thinking that they can fly like Superman. Why? Because you know that everyone knows that no such thing is possible. You would never accuse somebody of flying like Superman. People would laugh at you. People accuse each other of things that they subconsciously believe are possible. So we accuse each other of stealing and lying and betraying because those things happen all the time. So when Christians go around accusing everyone of being New Age because you think you're God and you think that you can be righteous of your own accord, it's like, oh, so you think that it's possible for a separate self to be God. Otherwise, why get upset? Why get angry over an utter impossibility? So the Christian belief system betrays itself, in other words. And at the heart of these judgments that the Christian paradigm launches at everybody, heretic, 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 is this deeply ingrained belief in separation, which is the ultimate form of pride, right? If a Christian could see this, they would relinquish the belief in separation. They would drop it like a hot potato, because you would see just how sort of blasphemous it is, in a sense, to claim that I am something separate from God. Not only is it, in a spiritual way, sort of like disrespectful to the one, to claim I'm something separate from you. It's like, oh, where'd you get your existence from then? It's like, oh, you're not part of the whole? Oh, so you're like a second God. Okay, I see. It is arrogance, right? But it's a little difficult to see that. And so sometimes it's easier to just see the foolishness of it, to see how unjustifiable the claim is that separation from God is possible. So what we believe about the nature of God will ultimately determine everything about how we live our lives, how we treat one another, and so forth. And so when we claim to be one with God, and I hope everybody hears me on this, when we claim oneness with God, we are not claiming, I, this person, am God, as the Christian would hear it, right? We are claiming only God exists. And so a better way of understanding that is, again, through natural theology. We could say that oneness is like a ray of light coming from the sun. A ray of light would say, I and the sun are one. Or if you've seen me, you've seen the sun, right? A ray could say these things, these statements that Christ makes, and they would be absolutely true. If you've seen a ray of light, you have seen the sun for all intents and purposes. A ray of light is nothing but the sun. But it's not the totality of the sun, nor does it claim to be. Nobody would claim that the sun is one ray of light. So the sun is not a ray of light. The ocean's not one drop of salt water. And yet a drop of salt water is nothing but the ocean. So that is the nature of oneness, right? We're saying, I derive all that I am from the one source. All that I am is God. There is none other. There's none else besides me, right? Isaiah 45:5. I and the sun are one, says the ray of light. I and the ocean are one, says the drop of water. I and my Father are one, says the Christ. It's the same principle. And so all of these teachings, these statements, these I am statements are ontology teachings from Yeshua in the book of John. Yeshua is trying to show us the nature of oneness. So think about Jesus saying, for example, all power in heaven and earth has been given to me. And then Jesus also said, and yet my Father is greater than I. That would seem to be, those two statements would seem to be at odds with one another, right? Well, if you have all power, then you're equal with God. But Jesus says, no, my Father is greater than I. Jesus is teaching that we inherit, we retain the nature, the image, the likeness of God. Everything is an expression of God. Psalm 82:5, all of you are children of the Most High, and yet my Father is greater than I. Think of those two statements as through the ray of light example. A ray of light could say, all that the sun is has been given to me, right? It's light, it's warmth, it's photons, it's color. I retain all the nature and likeness of the sun, and yet the sun is greater than I. This is oneness, right? It is the ultimate claim of humility and reverence for the divine. To realize that both statements are true, that I've been given all that my Father has, and yet my Father is greater than I. That's humility, right? It's not humble to deny what God has given you. It's humble to accept what God has given you. And so Jesus can say, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. But there was no ego making that claim. An ego can't claim these things. An ego has no control over anything. So all you can do is see what's true, is the point here. You can just see what's true. And that seeing of what's true will provoke the humility naturally. It will provoke the reverence naturally. And so we can come to see that oneness is a claim of relationship and unity. It's a total giving up of the small self, the human ego, and a full and total acknowledgement and surrender to the power of God alone. It's the recognition of, I can't even beat my own heart. I can't even think my own thoughts apart from you. God, I can do nothing without you. It is only through you that I live and move and have my being. And so here are a couple of really powerful questions that we can ask ourselves. And I want you to really ask yourself these questions. And I'll give you guys some space, a few moments here as I list off these questions for you to really sit with the question and try to answer it. Because it's actually in the trying to answer it that you're going to find the realizations come through. So here's the first question I want you to consider. If God didn't exist, could you exist? Really think about that. If God didn't exist, could you exist? And so why do you have any problem claiming your oneness? I could not even exist without God. Of course I'm one with God. What could be more obvious than this? You should start to claim oneness like that, my friends. You should start to know it as just an ordinary, obvious fact. Nothing spectacular, nothing mind-blowing. It's not some huge mountaintop epiphany. It can be, right? Maybe the first time you realized it in a mystical moment or a plant medicine ceremony, it felt like a mountaintop realization. Beautiful. Hold on to that. Remember that. Recall that. That's a powerful memory to keep. But you can't keep the profundity of the message forever, because eventually it has to become, oh yeah, this is the way reality is. It makes perfect sense. It's not some mind-blowing plot twist in the universe anymore. It's like, yeah, duh, of course I'm one with God. What else is there? So if God didn't exist, I couldn't exist. So I'm one with God. And this is often one of the first questions I ask Christians if we get into a discussion on oneness, and they say, oh, claiming oneness is evil. So, oh, okay, so you could exist without God is what you're saying. Like, oh, well, no, I'm not saying that. Well, of course you are. If it's evil to claim that I'm one with God, you're claiming that you're separate from God. So you exist apart from God. So if God didn't exist, you could still exist. You're like your own God, right? Well, no, backpedal. Because then when you go to the metaphysics, you see the truth, right? Oh yeah, that is what I'm claiming when I claim to be separate from God. I'm claiming that I'm like my own God. And that's the real blasphemy, right? According to Christian doctrine. So let's ask another question. Let's get a little more intricate with it. What do you do, since you're the body, right? You're the person, you're separate from God, you're this physical vehicle, that's you're the body, we got it. So what do you do with all the water you drink once you swallow it into your body? Like, how do you know which cells need it and where to send it? Like, how do you go about that? And so you might say, well, I have no idea. I have no clue at all. What I don't do anything with the water I swallow. I swallow it and that's the last of it. I don't know what happens to it after that. But it's like, okay, so you don't know how your very own blood is created from water. Like, you don't even know how your body turns water into blood and where it sends the water and what cell and when and how. What's more you than your own blood, you know? What could be more the person than your blood? Well, in fact, when you get cut, what do you say? You say, I'm bleeding. Or you say, oh, my blood is getting everywhere. My blood? Who's the my? You have no idea how this blood got there. You have no idea how to make it. You don't control any of the processes. So can you really say you're the body that's separate from God? What do you do with all the oxygen you inhale after you breathe it in? How do you know which cells in your body need the oxygen and which cells don't? You go, that's a good question. What do I do with the oxygen after I breathe it in? Well, I don't do anything. Bingo. That's true for everything, right? Not just the water you drink, not just the air you breathe, not just the thoughts you think or the actions you take, everything. You are a still unmoving point of awareness, watching everything. You're always in that observer position. And so the only choice we have, the only thing we can do is to be aware or to not be aware. We can be aware of something or we can not be aware of it. That's really the only choice we ever have. And so the nature of our awareness will massively transform everything we experience, right? It will upgrade everything. And so really all we're trying to do is we're not trying to improve ourselves or be righteous of our own accord or any such self-improvement, right? There is no separate self that can be improved. We might say that what the separate self really is all of the things I'm not aware of coming together and pretending to be an entity in my mind, right? The ego is the sum total of all my ignorance of truth, of God, and then the acting out of that ignorance over and over so that it just continually seems to be true. And so when we bring awareness to the self, when we become aware of our thoughts, our behaviors, our patterns, and so forth, and we see where there's not love in them, where there's not righteousness in them, where there's an absence of God in them, then they naturally get filled with that love and that righteousness, because it's the nature of a mistake to be corrected when it's recognized. So we're not trying to improve a separate lacking self. We're not trying to correct an incorrect self. We're just trying to realize what's true. And so, my friends, how can we realize our oneness with God, with everything, unless we claim it and lay hold of it in our mind and awareness? This is the biggest problem of the enlightenment path, and every sage will tell you this. It's kind of this idea that at some point, a separate self will get enlightenment, right? Will understand oneness. At some point, this separate self, which I definitely am, I'm this person for sure, this person will realize oneness. And that'll be great. But of course, the person never realizes oneness. The person is the belief in separation. So we can't realize oneness as some kind of attainment. We can only surrender separation. We can only lay down what is false and remove what is false. So that is the spiritual path, right? It's not a path of striving and seeking and chasing something. It's a path of daily surrender, letting go, laying down, removing our resistance. And so this is why Jesus said, if you want to be my disciple, deny thyself, take up thy cross daily, every single day, and then you can follow me. We have to adopt this path of every day. I try to lay down a little bit more of my belief in separateness, which I can do simultaneously by claiming a little bit more the truth of oneness. So this is a practice that we should get in the habit of doing every single day. In our morning meditation, we should wake up first thing and begin affirming and declaring our oneness with God. In the Jesus Way podcast, we teach this through the 5 O's, and we call it 5-O meditation. You meditate on one of the 5 O's, so omnipotence, let's say, as we just finished. You spend some moments in meditation considering the omnipotence of God. So what I just kind of walked you through would be one way of doing that. You just contemplate, wow, in every body, in every animal, every insect, every plant, on every world and every galaxy, there's this animating power that is performing every action in that body. It's the electromagnetic energy, it's the life force, it's the prana, the chi that's animating every vessel in its perfect expression at all times. Wow, God surely is omnipotent. And you kind of let yourself feel the awe, the wonder, and the mystery of that part of God's nature. And then you include yourself in it. You say, and so am I. So also this body that I think I am is fully animated by the power of God. If God didn't exist, I could not exist. I am fully and completely dependent on the one power. Or as we say here in our curriculum, I am resting in one power. 2 powers do not exist. So that would be you meditating on the quality of omnipotence. You can meditate on omniscience, the fact that God knows everything. Every thought in every mind, every memory, everything that will ever take place or ever has taken place, God already knows. So God's in full control. God's not worried. God's not breaking a sweat about what's going to happen tomorrow. Jesus said, again, sort of calling on natural theology, right? Consider the birds of the field. They neither toil nor strain, and yet your heavenly Father feeds each one of them. Consider the lilies of the field. They don't stress or strive or strain, and yet God takes care of them and clothes them in beauty. How much more will God take care of you? as long as you trust and surrender, right? So this is what it means to say everything God has is mine. It isn't a claim of a separate self, okay? To know oneness is to know I am a son, I'm a daughter, I'm a child of the Most High. And as a son or daughter, I can do and have everything that my Father has, according to my Father's will. You can't have it as an ego because the ego doesn't exist. So you can't have God's power through the ego's will, right? The ego's will is an illusion. It's not actually there. It's ignorance, it's madness, it's insanity, as the Course says. So yes, we've already been given everything we need, but we don't know how to use it or call upon it according to God's will. So just learning how to do that shows us our own oneness as well. When we learn how to stay and live and speak from alignment with God's will, then we understand how Jesus can say something like, all power in heaven and earth has been given to me. It means the moment I need supply, God will supply it. The moment I need healing, God will supply it. All I need to do is surrender to what God already is in me, right? I'm already one. I don't become more one with God. We never make anything true, yeah? We just realize that it's true. And that can sometimes feel harder, right? It almost feels easier that there would be some way we could make ourselves more one with God. Enough prayer, enough chanting, enough church service attendance, enough tithe and offering, and then I'll earn my oneness with God. So even though the Christian says they don't believe you can be one with God or earn it, everything they do is kind of showing that they do believe that, right? They're trying to live up to some standard to please an angry God. And so that's where we all go wrong in a way, right? Even if you're not a fundamentalist Christian, it's so easy to fall back into that thought system, which says, I'm unworthy, I'm guilty, I'm this person who's made all these mistakes. How could I be worthy to know oneness with God? Ugh, it's way too lofty for me. I'll just take up meditation or yoga and begin my long, drudging path back to oneness. Maybe in 4 or 5 lifetimes, I'll realize that I'm one with God, but not right now. See, it's always the belief that there's a person who's going to do it, who's going to get it, who's going to realize it. And enlightenment is the realization that there is no person. There is nothing separate from God. And so if that's already true, why not claim it boldly and courageously?